Well, so I guess really we want to do is talk about ourselves a little bit. We're getting a lot of questions, but first I want to thank the AAAS, Lemelson Foundation, IBM, everyone for really setting up this Invention Ambassadors. This is one of the few times we've all kind of gotten together to do things, but I know in our own communities we really try to push this. I know the USPTO has been extremely involved. Elizabeth's here from the USPTO, so so basically I'm a Miami-born kid who grew up in Southern California. I like the water, and I was kind of in a high school of entertainment in some sense. We all like to entertain ourselves anyways. But used to be in the singing groups and kind of play at Disneyland and various places like that. Kevin Costner came out of our high school like right after me and stuff. He went on to big fame. Then I moved to Canada, where my parents were at the time, and I went to school in Toronto, where immediately, probably after second year, I knew I didn't want to be a music major really fast, but then I started taking a psychology course, and I met a professor that was putting electrodes in rat brains, and I said, this is fun. And so my career started in doing that. Essentially, after that, we went to the University of British Columbia, and really focused then on neuroscience. Really, how do we look at what causes neurodegenerative diseases? So some of the early mechanisms involved in neurodegenerative diseases have to work on with some really, really good people. Met a really interesting man, Sir John Eccles, who discovered synapse. Got a Nobel Prize. He worked in Australia during that period, but he was at UBC doing some writing a book with my mentors. And so that encouraged me to go to the Australian National University. We kind of went over to Australia and had a great time. And that's probably where my invention knack really started. And it was one we heard earlier about being an inventor on patents. But there's so many ways we can be an inventor or a maker. And usually it's out of necessity. And being in an Australian lab, I can tell you there's very little money. And so there are opportunities to try to build equipment, to test animals, to do various things. And so even in those days in the 70s, I remember making a circuit board in order to turn a printing calculator into a printing counter for measuring equipment and stuff. And I didn't know anything about patents, so I printed the circuit, I published the circuit board in a methods paper in a journal. Probably published a lot of methods papers that I could have patents on later on. But not being in that kind of culture environment, it was more about, in those days, publish or perish, in essence. So having gone from there, starting to work in the idea of transplanting cells from into the brain to try to repair the nervous system. What we then did was I went to Hopkins and worked with a group to really focus in on this area. One of the first papers we did was looking at fetal tissue transplantation in various neurodegenerative diseases. And so that started a career of mine to really try to take cells. Can we take cells? Can we put them into the damaged brain? And can we repair function? That led to a number of clinical trials in Parkinson's. You probably remember those trials. It led to a number of trials using animal cells. Led to kind of biomaterials trials, and so I was involved in helping start a company called Cellular Transplants, which was the first company along that line, which then morphed actually into Stem Cells Inc., which is in Menlo Park here, so it's still around. And that was my first foray into companies. It was my first foray into patents. By then I'd been to being a full professor in Fast Track in Ohio and various places. And so it was a whole new world. I was up at Brown University at that point, moved down to the company went public, I said I'm moving down to where I really want to live, and that's by the sun. And so there's not many medical schools that are by the water. And so I found a great opportunity. It was in South Florida. If you haven't been, awesome place right in Tampa, real close to the water, and been there for a long time. Now, having said that, having had those kinds of experiences, and then really now looking at academics in a different sort of way of a business and academics, what we really just thought of was, let's take the research we're doing, let's translate it, because what we realized was you can't get into clinical trials unless you have some intellectual property that you can really get some investment on. It kind of stops at animal studies or stops at some safety studies in an academic institution. So we ended up changing a lot of things there, doing a lot of research that led to potential patents. And one thing I noticed was that there was very little credit in an academic environment for doing intellectual property, for creating companies, which we had done during my stay there, to do a lot of these kinds of things. And you could bring in lots of money in royalties to the university, but it wouldn't count as much as just getting a $50,000 American Heart Grant, for example. As far as what an academic institution would say. You could spend years getting a patent through, or I could spend a couple nights writing a manuscript for an OK journal and get it published, and the one would count. So it just didn't make sense to me. And so we spent a lot of time trying to change the culture, unless you're at Stanford or MIT, one of these kinds of schools. When you're at a kind of mid-level academic institution, state school in this country, it's not part of the culture. It's not part of the culture of our education. It's not part of the culture of our kids' education. And so what we really wanted to do was to continue that aspect. So we spent a lot of time working on how do we do this, how do we encourage this. I became an administrator after a while, mainly because I was the only one who could keep my department in the black in many ways. I tried to help where I could. And one thing was, I've been wanting to try to get patents, licensing, commercialization, startups, all these kinds of entrepreneurial activities into the tenure and promotion guidelines. And also get faculty that are doing these to be honored, at least at the university. We managed to do that at the University of South Florida. And what was interesting was that in the last 5 years, and I don't like to tout a lot of things, but in the last 5 years or so, that university, which is mid-level state university, has been in the top. There's a ranking that comes out, top 300 organizations for U.S. patents in the world. The IPO, Intellectual Property Owners Association, puts it out, and we've been in that organization. Of course, number one in that seems like every year is IBM, the most. And so how did a university like this do that? And what was interesting is then I moved over to senior administration, cross campus, and a lot of my other vice presidents for research at other universities says, hey, we'd like to do that at our place. We approached the USPTO, I remember the day, I got a couple more minutes. Approached the USPTO, we said we want to take this and we want to try to make it a national organization that works on patents and academics. David Kapos was the Undersecretary of Commerce, an IBM person who went with Obama, and he encouraged us, among others. And so we formed the National Academy of Inventors about 4 or 5 years ago, which I'm the president this year. And that organization has grown remarkably in just 4 years. It has now 160 research universities that are members. It has 3,000 individual academic members that have issued U.S. patents. And at the request, actually, when I was talking to David Kapos in the car one day driving into the airport, we talked about getting some really high-level folks at the National Academies level that have fellowships, kind of like your fellows program here, your innovators here. And so we have a fellows program now going in its 3rd year. We're going to induct 170 new fellows at Caltech next month. We'll have about 450 fellows these are senior academics with over 14,000 patents. Just those academics. It's hard to believe that academics has contributed so much to our economy, so much to everything we do. So this has been really great for us to change the ecosystem. A lot of the universities now have started to put these kind of guidelines into their tenure promotion, have looked at if you wear the pin, you're kind of like a mini rock star walking around campus. You know, it's a change. Kansas State